Okay, well, thank you so much for the lovely introduction and also the invitation to join you tonight, and also to, I think, maybe start a conversation together, which I hope we can give some time to, and also to maybe, yes, see where we might end up. I'm just going to do that for a moment. It was only recently that I remembered this photograph. I can distinctly recall how important this day was. It is a day marked by self-determination and also, I would say, rebelliousness, as well as by hope in the future. Hope in what I, as an emerging subject, confronting the social order around me, might become. The photograph says, I look into the camera not with a hard stare, but instead with a rather lost expression. I am surrendering not to the situation, but to something beyond the scene. I am transfixed by the horizon that I am beginning to see, the horizon of broken dreams, of frustrated thoughts, of longing, as well as possibility, intimacy, transformation. A future that is only starting to appear, one occupied by different voices and different languages. On one side, the voices of negation and of lawfulness, of ordering and prescription, and on the other, a language of dreaming and of imagination, and the voices that speak through the night, and with the tones of freedom. In other words, on this day, when I sit still for the photograph, I begin to express myself as a subject, looked upon by so many others, and yet also, and importantly, defined by a horizon to come. Here, I want to draw attention to an important, if not essential, element. On this day, staring into the camera, the institutional framework of school, and the social order I am beginning to confront, here I decide to wear a particular t-shirt. One that is clearly marked by a musical reference. I look into the camera not with a hard stare, but rather with a lost expression. An expression which says, I am listening to a world over and above this one. The t-shirt announces, it speaks for all to see that this body, this subject, is captured and is surrendering and is driven by what it listens to. It is self-determination expressed by way of the sonic imagination. Identity finding support through the audible and enacting what I might call an acoustic resistance. I remember how important empty fields, abandoned sites, the cliffs and the beach, as well as pathways that crossed in and out of the light, how these were vital to being a teenager. Growing up in Southern California, I was fortunate enough to be part of a small group of friends whose desires and imaginations echoed my own. In short, we were generally aligned with what others would call the dropouts, the troublemakers, and the dreamers. Teenagers who were captured by existential literature, punk music, the golden sun, and landscapes of the night. In this situation, we found ourselves at odds with the normative patterns of the social milieu, to a point where we often had to run, to escape, searching for alternative territories. We found such territories in the empty fields, the abandoned sites, the cliffs and the beach, edges, and upon hidden pathways that trailed over and through hills and back alleys. In a sense, we mapped out a hidden geography, crisscrossing the articulation of streets, connecting points of secret meeting between our homes, the school with trajectories of escape. We hid things in bushes, we kept clothes in trees. We knew where the cops were and where the parents would be. And we kept to the darkness, often spending nights listening to the ocean and to each other. The darkness in which things may find refuge. The darkness in which to imagine other worlds. The darkness in which life and love found new possibilities, under cover and out of sight. The darkness of shared listening. I describe these landscapes of the night, as well as that of listening, to consider how such qualities of vacancy and periphery, of dark murmurings and whispered voices, how these qualities in a way afford important and rather urgent conditions for alternative sociality, a space for a second life. It is clear that without these landscapes, life would have been much less bearable or edifying. I wonder on some level if I would have learned what it meant to be different and how to resist the push toward conformity, what it meant to nurture loving relationships outside the family structure, and what sound and listening may help create, especially as a means of negotiation between oneself and the world. Such lessons are radically linked to peripheries and to landscapes of the night, wherein identity can be sought outside a regime of visibility, which captured us according to our skin, our clothes, our appearance, each read as negative expressions. To stand against such discriminations required an alternative logic, a reworking of the senses and the sensible, as well as through the sharing of angst and imagining, all of which found orientation and meaning through the invisible tonalities of hidden places and the noise of being together. In short, it was necessary to formulate a kind of practice of nocturnal gathering and sonic attunement, and to craft a speech of and through difference. I tell this story to situate us within a particular acoustic territory, one tensed between landscapes of the night and those of industrious life, between alternative identities and the articulation of a productive appearance, and finally, between being looked upon, watched, and a desire for the noises that might obliterate all that stood over us. The noise and the listening. The audible intensities that would weave together a small group of friends, undercover and out of sight, and that forms into a type of second culture. It was here, in this condition of reorientation, guided by the blue-black of night and the rhythmic ocean, and from which a listening beyond what held us and toward each other took shape, that something else became possible, the making of a tribal relation, an acoustical logic. What might we hear in this situation now? Do we create another type of collectivity here, one also determined by listening, by a desire to reorient ourselves through other forms of knowing? Is this not a landscape, or at least a space in which some gather? To attend to particular sounds, us, as well as the whispers and the shouts of the global order always nearby, the languages that search for other social meanings and which capture our listening. Is there a territory nearby, or one to be constructed, in which all the disenfranchised, the hopeful, the lost, and the restless may gather, and which also resists my gaze? I would say these are questions that I carry with me and that lead to other journeys and other territories, other landscapes in which commonality may be built from the urgency of differences, and that may also foster other types of self-determination, collectivity, and a shared belief in what is still possible. It was when visiting Prague that I discovered the traces of just such a situation, and in particular when I came to this building near the edges of the city center. The story leads us to this landscape, but also to the individuals who would gather here, to escape, to hide, as well as to form a second community, what Václav Benda would call the parallel polis. Throughout the 1970s and 80s, the struggle against the totalitarian system in Czechoslovakia led to the formation of illegal gatherings in which artists, musicians, writers, actors, and other cultural figures tried to sustain a level of creative and critical activity. Many had been imprisoned, others were censored or exiled. There was little room for free expression, and the possibility of openly appearing became increasingly difficult, as one could easily be criminalized, arrested. Such a condition led to attempts at resistance, as well as solidarity, to create, through desperate measures, a possible space for nurturing alternative culture. The art historian Ivan Uris would come to theorize these attempts through what he called second culture. Second culture existed as a secret underground, gatherings and events in which certain people would come together on the periphery to perform and to listen together, to dream and to resist. Within this second culture, rock and psychedelic music were essential material and reference, and Uris himself and others, such as Václav Havel, often related the question of resistance and freedom through musical expression, finding support through the intensities of free sound. We might start to understand this as a culture founded on the sonic imagination, maybe even a listening from below. Mystic fortunes of this otherworldly desire, the glow and the brash resonance, this flight of the imagination that may tattoo the skin with languages of loss and renewal, the fragment and then the vibration. Shall we cry out, join together, love the streets and the dirty river? Shall we quote the lyric to send shivers down the spines of everyone? This that is nowhere and everywhere, that is inside and out, that dips and drops, rises so high and dissipates into the ether of heavenly capture, drunk and despairing, but at least hanging on. And then the song picks up, continues to vibrate the floors and the walls, making our hair stand on end and the hands to swell with such energy. Can we grab hold of all this material around us to craft a new relation, the spaces of all this life, and to escape, to fall, to crawl past the fences, hiding together, touching, whispering? Undercover and gathering together, a territory of survival as well as threadbare freedom, and which I may pose here as the basis for an acoustic ecology of the oppressed. There are two defining features here that I might highlight. Secrecies supported through the invisible and ephemeral qualities of sound and listening, and the disruptive intensities of noise, which may act as a type of weapon to give forceful meaning to the hidden sphere and those that occupy its weak territories. When visiting Prague, I also came upon another story, told by a man I met there. He spoke of the secret musical events and the underground culture, but he also spoke of smaller, more intimate gatherings based upon listening to illegal records smuggled in from the West. For instance, he told of how a record by the Rolling Stones became a shared object, passed from hand to hand, illegal and undercover, to be played secretly in bedrooms and back rooms for a few gathered friends who would listen together. He spoke of this, and I started to imagine the scene, the coming together around this special object, spinning, sounding, the closing of doors and of windows, closing, and the secrecy and the enthusiasm, as well as the withdrawal, back, under, within which some would find each other. Identity is shaped by the grooves that spiral inward, spinning, sounding, magnetized by this sonic imagination, and then outward to gain intensity within this small shelter of shared excitement, angst, disillusion, as well as hope, undercover and in the dark, and yet amplified. A second culture under the first, a second listening. Okay, thank you.